Hello, my name is Keith and I am the Woke Pastor. I am here to share my theology and how it informs and forms our lives. The Citizens United Supreme Court decision was brought about because the case was about limiting independent expenditures on political campaigns by groups such as corporations, labor unions, or other collective entities, violating the First Amendment because limitations constitute a prior restraint on speech. In regards to that, I have a few points I'd like to share. One is Citizens United does not delineate fact from fiction, so you don't know, in terms of freedom of speech, what is fact and what is fiction. Corporations are not individuals and do not have First Amendment rights and therefore should not be allowed to purchase elections. Corporations corrupt the marketplace of ideas by flooding it with speech that they supported because of their funding advantages. Citizen United provides special interests gaining a higher level of political access and essentially blackmailing politicians into pursuing their objectives by threatening them with advertising attacks. Corporations have no voting ability, no individual morality or loyalty concerns. People who are members of corporations still can exercise their individual speech rights. Corporations that exercise such a sweeping set of free speech rights infringe on the rights of their shareholders who might not agree with what the board chose to support. Citizens United threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. A democracy cannot function effectively when its constituent members believe laws are being bought and sold, as said by Justice Stevens. Independent expenditures are sometimes a factor in gaining political access, and large independent expenditures generate more influence than direct campaign contributions. Corporations could threaten politicians with negative advertising to gain unprecedented leverage, cites Caperton v. A.T. Massey Coal Company. Citizens United provides the opportunity, in fact, promotes the opportunity for corruption in elections and undermines public confidence in democracy. Corporations and corporate CEOs like Bezos, Musk, and Zuckerberg can spend far more to influence elections than any ordinary citizen and therefore dismantle the core aspects of our democracy. Legal entities like corporations should not be given speech protections under the First Amendment, which protects individual self expression and self realization. Corporate spending is the furthest from the core of political expression protected by the Constitution. Citizens United gives the special interest in their lobbyists even more power in Washington while undermining the influence of average Americans who make small contributions to support their political candidates. Obama condemned the decision during the 2010 State of the Union address, stating that last week the Supreme Court reversed a century of law to open the floodgates for special interests, including foreign corporations, to spend without limit in our elections. Well, I don't think American elections should be bankrolled by America's most powerful interests or worse, by foreign entities. Democratic Senator Russ Feingold, a lead sponsor of the BCRA, stated the decision was a terrible mistake. Presented with a relatively narrow legal issue, the Supreme Court chose to roll back laws that have limited the role of corporate money in federal elections since Teddy Roosevelt was president. Roosevelt was one who fought against corruption in government. Representative Alan Grayson stated that it was the worst Supreme Court decision since the Dred Scott case and that the court had opened the door to political bribery and corruption in elections to come. Senator John McCain, a co-crafter of the BCR, said there's going to be over time a backlash when you see the amounts of union and corporate money that's going into political campaigns. McCain was disappointed by the decision of the Supreme Court and the lifting of the limits on corporate and union contributions, but not surprised by the decision, saying that it was clear that Justice Roberts, Alito, and Scalia, by their very skeptical and even sarcastic comments, were very much opposed to the BCRA. Consumer activist Ralph Nader condemned the ruling, saying that with this decision, corporations can now directly pour vast amounts of corporate money through independent expenditures into the electoral swamp already flooded with corporate campaign PAC contribution dollars. When dissenting the ruling and related developments, former President Jimmy Carter called the United States an oligarchy with unlimited political bribery in an interview with Tom Hartman. Constitutional law scholar Lawrence H. Tribe wrote that talking about a business corporation as merely another way that individuals might choose to organize their association with another to pursue their common expressive aims is worse than unrealistic. It obscures the very real injustice and distortion entailed in the phenomenon of some people using other people's money to support candidates they have made no decision to support, or to oppose candidates they have made no decision to oppose. Cass Sunstein of Harvard University listed Citizens United as the worst Supreme Court decision since 1960, noting that the decision is undermining our system of democracy itself. The New York Times stated in an editorial the Supreme Court has handed lobbyists a new weapon. A lobbyist can now tell any elected official, if you vote wrong, my company, labor union, or interest group will spend unlimited sums explicitly advertising against your reelection. Jonathan Alter called it the most serious threat to American democracy in a generation. The Christian Science Monitor wrote that the court had declared outright that corporate expenditures cannot corrupt elected officials, that influence over lawmakers is not corruption, and that appearance of influence will not undermine public faith in our democracy. Critics predicted that Citizens United ruling would bring about a new era of corporate influence in politics, allowing companies to buy elections to promote their financial interests. Instead, large corporations, usually through super PACs, have come from a small group of billionaires based largely on ideology. Eugene Volokh stated that the most influential actors in most political campaigns are media corporations, which overtly editorialize for and against candidates and also influence elections by choosing what to cover and how to cover it. Holding that corporations like Exxon would fear alienated voters by supporting candidates, the decision really meant that voters would hear more messages from more sources. Citizens United has often been credited for the creation of super PACs, political action committees that make no direct financial contributions to candidates or parties, but instead spend money on advertising and can in turn accept unlimited contributions from individuals, corporations, and unions. According to a 2021 study, the ruling weakened political parties while strengthening single-issue advocacy groups and super PACs funded by billionaires with pet issues. The ruling made it easier for self-promoting politicians to undermine political processes and democratic norms to promote themselves by soliciting funds from such committees. Citizens United also allowed incorporated 501c4 public advocacy groups such as the National Rifle Association of America, the Sierra Club, or Citizens United itself to make expenditures in political races. Such groups may not, under the tax code, have a primary purpose of engaging in electoral advocacy, but they can advertise on behalf of larger political issues. Several partisan organizations, such as Crossroads Grassroots Policy Strategies in 21st Century Colorado, have since registered as tax-exempt 501c4 groups and have engaged in substantial political spending. This has led to claims of large secret donations and questions about whether such groups should be required to disclose their donors, which they were required to do before Citizens United ruling. The result of the Citizens United ruling is the purchased presidency of Donald J. Trump by corporations and their CEOs. The floodgates of political corruption are wide open and now protected by a broken justice system and a mainline corporate-sponsored media. As a citizen of these United States of America, I appeal to the hearts and minds of our elected officials to repeal the decision made by the Supreme Court in the Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission case. Return the power to the electorate and fight against corrupt politicians, and corporate greed.